The alarms tore through the palace before I even opened my eyes. Red light spilled across my chamber walls, and the floor shook once, hard, like something massive had struck the shield dome above the city. I sat up already knowing this was not a drill. My guards never sounded that alarm for drills. I am Leora, second flame of the Valith Dominion, heir to a throne that has never once felt warm to me. And on that night, my empire was under attack, and the only person standing between me and the enemy at my door was a human soldier nobody had bothered to introduce me to yet. The doors burst open before my attendants could reach them. A man stumbled in, breathing hard, blood on his sleeve, a weapon in his hand that looked nothing like the polished ceremonial blades my guards carried. He was tall, plain-looking, nothing like the nobles who filled my court. His eyes found mine in half a second. "You're the princess," he said. It wasn't a question. "Who let you into my chamber?" I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be, though my hands were already shaking. "Nobody let me." "I ran," he said. "The outer wall is breached. Raiders, they're not here for treasure, they're here for you." I did not have time to process the strangeness of a stranger giving me orders in my own palace, because the wall behind him exploded inward. Smoke and stone filled the room. I was thrown against my bed frame, ears ringing, and through the haze I saw shapes moving in the dust, armored figures with weapons raised, hunting shapes, searching shapes. The man grabbed my arm before I could even think to run. "Move," he said, and pulled me through a side passage I did not know existed, one clearly marked only for staff, dust falling from the ceiling with every explosion above us. "Who are you?" I demanded as we ran, my ceremonial robes catching on broken stone, slowing me down until he simply reached over and tore the trailing fabric away without asking permission, which no one had ever dared to do to me in my life. "Ethan," he said, "human delegation. Wrong place, right time, I guess." We reached a stairwell and he stopped, pressing his back to the wall, listening. I had spent 300 cycles being trained to rule, to negotiate, to hold my expression steady in front of enemies who wanted to see me break. None of that training told me what to do when the enemy was already inside the walls, and my own guards were nowhere to be found. "Where is my father?" I asked. "Where is the royal guard?" "Your father's group went east, toward the shuttle bay. Your guards are either dead or fighting a losing position 2 floors down," Ethan said, and I flinched at the bluntness of it, the total absence of court manners. "I'm sorry, there's no time to soften that. You should not speak to me that way. You should probably survive the next 10 minutes before you worry about how I talk," he said, and something about the certainty in his voice made me follow him instead of arguing further. We moved through the lower halls of the palace, past shattered statues of my ancestors, past a guard station where 3 of my own soldiers lay unmoving on the floor, and I felt something twist painfully inside my chest that I did not have a name for, because grief was not an emotion the court had trained into me either. Ethan did not let me stop and look. He kept pulling me forward, checking corners before I even understood there was danger to check for. "How do you know this palace better than I do?" I asked, breathless, as we ducked into a storage corridor. "I don't. I've been here 11 days. But I've read every layout your engineers filed for the trade summit, because that's what you do before walking into a foreign palace with your life on the line," he said. "Guess it's paying off." A raider stepped into the corridor ahead of us, armor scorched, weapon rising toward me with an intent I understood instantly, even without translation. Before I could scream, Ethan had already moved, closing the distance faster than I thought a body could move, disarming the raider with 2 brutal, efficient motions, and it was over before I fully registered it had begun. He did not celebrate. He did not even pause. He simply checked the corridor again, and kept walking. "You killed him," I said, my voice unsteady. "He was going to kill you," Ethan said, not looking back. "I'll live with that trade every day of my life, and not lose sleep over it. Keep moving." We reached a lower gate that led toward the old escape tunnels, tunnels built centuries ago by ancestors who understood that even palaces fall sometimes, tunnels I had only read about in dusty historical records and never expected to use. Ethan found the entrance faster than the guards assigned to guide me would have. "How did you know this existed?" I asked. "I didn't. I guessed, based on the old stone pattern near the kitchens. Every palace has one. Yours just hit it better," he said, working the mechanism with quick, careful hands until the stone shifted and a dark passage opened beneath us. We descended into darkness, the sound of fighting fading above us, replaced by the slow drip of water somewhere in the tunnel, and the pounding of my own heart in my ears. For the first time since the alarm sounded, we had a moment that was not immediate danger, and in that moment I felt the shaking in my hands finally catch up with me. "You're safe for now," Ethan said quietly, noticing. Breathe. You did well back there. I did nothing. You did everything, I said. You kept moving when you were terrified. That's not nothing. That's the only thing that matters in a fight like this, he said. And for the first time his voice was gentle instead of urgent, and it struck me strangely how easily he shifted between the two, like he had done this before, protected people before, comforted them before. We reached the end of the tunnel just as dawn light broke faintly through a grate above us. Ethan tested the mechanism, listened for danger above, and only then pushed it open, letting cold morning air spill into the tunnel. We climbed out into a quiet grove outside the palace walls, far enough from the fighting that the sound of it had become a distant echo instead of a roar. I turned to look back at my home. Smoke rose from 3 different points along the outer wall, and for the first time in my long life, I understood what it meant to almost lose everything in a single night. They came for you specifically, Ethan said, watching me carefully. Do you know why? There have been whispers, rival houses who believe the throne should not pass to me, I admitted, the words feeling strange coming out of my mouth, because admitting weakness was something I had been trained my entire life never to do. Then we get you somewhere safe, and we find out exactly which house sent them, and your people deal with it properly, Ethan said, already scanning the tree line for further threats, his body still tense, still ready, even now. Why did you save me? I asked. You are not my guard. You are not sworn to my house. You had no reason to run toward danger for a stranger. He considered the question longer than I expected, and when he answered, his voice had lost its urgency completely. Where I come from, we don't wait for someone to be family before deciding they're worth saving, he said. You were in danger. I could help. That was the whole decision. I did not know how to respond to something so simple, so unguarded, offered without any expectation of reward or favor. In my world, every kindness came with a price attached, spoken or unspoken. I searched his face for the price and found none. The sound of engines cut through the morning air, and for a terrible second I feared the raiders had found us, until I recognized the markings on the approaching craft as my father's personal guard. Ethan straightened immediately, stepping slightly in front of me out of pure instinct, until the craft landed and my father himself climbed out, alive, unharmed, relief written plainly across his usually composed face. Leora, he said, crossing the grove quickly, and pulling me into an embrace that surprised us both, because such open affection was rare even between us. I feared the worst. I am alive because of him, I said, gesturing to Ethan, who stood back respectfully, giving us the moment. My father studied him for a long beat, the way rulers study anyone who might become useful or dangerous. You have my gratitude, human. The Dominion does not forget a debt like this. I didn't do it for a debt, Ethan said simply, and I saw my father's expression shift slightly, the same quiet surprise I had felt myself in the tunnel. In the days that followed, the palace was rebuilt, the guilty house was found and dealt with according to our laws, and life slowly returned to its rigid, careful rhythm. But something in me had shifted permanently that night, some old wall cracked open by a stranger who ran toward danger simply because it was the right thing to do, who spoke to me plainly instead of performing courtly flattery, who treated my fear as something to steady rather than something to exploit. Weeks later, sitting in the palace garden where I had once believed I would never feel anything real again, I found myself laughing at something small Ethan said, a genuine, unguarded sound I barely recognized as my own. He looked over at me with quiet surprise, and then with something warmer, something that made the tightness in my chest ease for the first time in longer than I could remember. There it is, he said softly. I wondered if you had one of those in there somewhere. I did not have an answer for him. I only knew that for the first time in 300 cycles, I was not performing an expression. I was simply, finally, feeling one.